Welcome, and thank you for standing by. I would like to inform all participants that today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. All participants will be in a listen-only mode until the question and answer portion of today's conference. At that time, to ask a question, please press star 1. Please stand by for your conference. Thank you. Welcome, and thank you for standing by. All participants will be able to listen only until the question and answer portion of today's conference. At that time, please press star 1. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, please disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the conference over to Mr. Josh Finch. Sir, you may begin.
Good evening and welcome to NASA's Kennedy Space Center. I'm Josh Finch with NASA's Office of Communications. We're here to discuss NASA's SpaceX Crew-5 mission to the International Space Station as a part of the agency's Commercial Crew program. Teams from NASA, SpaceX, and more just completed the launch readiness review for the mission, and senior representatives are here to talk more about the review. We have today Steve Stitch, Manager of the Commercial Crew program, Joel Montalbano, Manager of the International Space Station program for NASA, Emily Nelson, Chief Flight Director at Johnson Space Center, Kurt Costello, Chief Scientist, NASA's International Space Station program, Benji Reed, Senior Director, Human Spaceflight Programs at SpaceX, Junichi Sakai, Manager at International Space Station program at JAXA, Sergei Krikalev, Executive Director, Human Spaceflight Programs at Roscosmos, and Brian Chiswick, the Launch Weather Officer from the U.S. Space Force 45th Weather Squadron. We'll start with opening comments from each of our presenters and then open it up to media questions. And first, we'll start with Steve Stitch.
Yeah, thanks, Josh, and good evening, and thanks for your interest in joining us this evening. We just completed the launch readiness review for Crew-5. It's an exciting time to be here as we set up for the launch on Wednesday. We're going to methodically take our time as we move through each of the steps getting into the launch on Wednesday. I really would like to thank the entire NASA and SpaceX team for all their hard work over the last year getting to this point, and in particular over the last week with Hurricane Ian. A lot of people, were affected by the storm, and the workforce is incredibly dedicated on both the SpaceX and NASA teams, and we certainly do remember those folks on the other side of Florida who lost a lot, lost their lives and their livelihoods during the storm, and we keep them in our thoughts and prayers. As we move forward tonight, we had a good LRR. We are proceeding toward launch on Wednesday, October the 5th, with a launch time of noon. We would dock on 10/6 at about 4:57 p.m. That's the longest rendezvous we've had to date. It's about a 29-hour rendezvous, and that's just the way the phasing sets up. We still have 3 open items that we're tracking as we get into launch, and Benji may share more details, but the first is the recovery ship. Just read the instruction that recovers the booster. Is having a few technical issues relative to its ability to station keep for the launch, and so we're working through that and trying to get that vehicle up and ready to support. After the static fire, which we did yesterday, and kudos to the SpaceX and NASA team, did a great job with the practice session with the crew, which we call dry dress, and then the static fire of the first stage. One of the thrust vector control actuators for one of the 9 Merlin engines had a bit of a funny reading that was a little bit strange, and so as a matter of precaution, we're going to swap that actuator out on that engine. We'll do that work tonight and then do a series of checks on it getting ready for launch. And then finally, inside Dragon did very well yesterday. Tonight we're in the middle of topping off the consumables that were used during that dry dress with the crew. We're also working to finalize the configuration of the portable fire extinguisher system on Dragon. It has shown signs of a leak, and we're working through that. We think there's a quick disconnect that's leaking. We'll go ahead and get in there and fix that. We do have backup opportunities on the 6th of October and the 7th. We want to talk a little bit more about using the 6th. We hadn't talked openly about that, but with the ISS reboost, that looks like that trajectory is a little bit more viable. And so we're working with the flight ops community on that opportunity. It's a little bit longer than the rendezvous we're taking on the 5th, and so we want to talk through that a little bit more. Other than that, the hardware is ready to go. The teams are doing great. We're going to take it step by step. We'll get to see Nicole tomorrow morning and talk to her. She's very excited about flying in space. It's very exciting for Commercial Crew to have our first female commander in our program, and we're very excited to also fly Anna Kokina from Roscosmos as well. the first time to fly her. We know it's a treasured responsibility to fly our international partners, and we're looking forward to launch this week. And I'll hand it over to Joel.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you again for joining us today. I'll echo some of Steve's comments. For those affected by the hurricane, you continue to be in our thoughts and our prayers. I'm really proud of the team that has been preparing the vehicle and the rocket and getting us ready and coming out of the launch readiness review today, the space station program, including our international partners, our go, and we're looking forward to this mission. As you heard, the SpaceX team and the commercial crew guys have a little work to do, and those guys will be working through those items. But from a space station standpoint, we'll be ready to go as soon as they get resolved. Continue to be a busy time on board the International Space Station. As many of you know, last week we just completed a Soyuz rotation, a successful Soyuz rotation that went well. We're looking forward to another handover mission. This handover between the two crews will be about 5 days, and once we get on orbit and get moving, we'll be able to refine the landing time for Crew-4. This crew, as you know, consists of 3 first-time crew members, and we can't wait to see their smiling faces on orbit and when they get on board, both in the Dragon and then when they get docked to the International Space Station. Veteran Koichi Wakata will be making his 5th flight, and so we're excited to see Koichi on orbit as well. This vehicle will dock to the Node 2 forward port. The crew will stay docked to the International Space Station about 150 days. Dr. Costello will talk to you in a little bit, but this crew is scheduled with over 200 experiments in the areas of human research, in the areas of commercialization, in the areas of technology development that will allow us to leave low Earth orbit and go further on exploration. So with that, we're excited for this mission. We're looking forward to it. And let me hand over to Chief Flight Director Emily Nelson.
Thank you, Joel. The crew is doing really well and looking forward to beginning their mission. Today they had some medical checks. They did debriefs after yesterday's very smooth dry dress and got some time with their families. Tomorrow they'll get their final briefings, and then on their ultimate dinner before launch day, they're going to enjoy some steak and pasta. Then launch day, they're going to get up at about 4:30 in the morning. That's about 7.5 hours before launch. They'll get some final procedure reviews, a weather briefing, and then at about 4 hours out, they'll head to the suit room where SpaceX will take over and get them ready to go into the vehicle. Meanwhile, on board the ISS, the crew is preparing for Crew-5 arrival. There's going to be a bit of a sleep shift for the space station crew, so they'll have a light day Wednesday before staying up really late to welcome their friends on board. Sam, Jessica, and Bob are going to move out of their sleep stations after launch to make room for Nicole, Josh, and Koichi. Anna's sleep station is, of course, already ready for her. And then Lead Flight Director Greg Whitney's team will be in Mission Control Houston for rendezvous and docking to start the crew handover. So we're looking forward to their launch and arrival. And with that, I'll hand it over to Chief Scientist Kurt Costello.
Thank you, Emily. We're really excited to have Crew-5 come aboard our multidisciplinary laboratory in space. They'll be participating, as Joel said, in some of over 235 investigations going on this increment during their stay. 76 of those investigations are new investigations to the space station. Today I'm going to talk just briefly about 3 of them that really highlight some of the areas of human health that we're trying to work on with the space station. First off, our Canadian Space Agency partner is flying a new investigation called CardioBreath, which looks into astronaut cardiorespiratory health. They'll be doing this with the aid of a new custom-fitted biomonitoring suit that actually records their heart rate, blood pressure, breathing rates, and activity levels throughout their stay. The BFF, the biofabrication facility, is also flying back to space station. It was last flown in 2019, and it will be flying 2 types of investigations in this 3D tissue printing facility. Meniscus 2, which will be bioprinting knee cartilage tissue, and cardio, which will be printing cardiomyocyte patches used for organ repair and hopefully one-day transplantation. This facility is being upgraded this time. It has a new temperature-controlled print head, which makes it more compatible with many of the different bioinks available for printing human tissue. And lastly, on this flight with the crew will be the investigation Rhodium microbiome isolates. And this is a gut-on-a-chip microbiome study looking at 10 different species of bacteria significant in the role of human health. This will be one of the first investigations to look at not only the entire assay of those organisms on orbit, taking genetic samples, but also their function as they're introduced to the processing of foods in that system, both in microgravity and in 1G on the ground. This is exciting. It could tell us much about the health of the human microbiome as we exist in microgravity and low Earth orbit. For more on science, go to www.nasa.gov/ISS-science, and I'll hand it over now to Benji Reed. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much. First of all, good afternoon, good evening to everybody, and thank you for having me here and having SpaceX here. As always, this is an exciting time in space flight, and it's a particularly busy week here at SpaceX. Right now we have 3 separate teams preparing for 3 launches from 3 different pads in less than 3 days. Starlink is now targeting Tuesday, October 4th from the Vandenberg launch site here in California. And originally we were targeting today, but we are allowing more time for pre-launch checkouts. Of course, Crew-5 is still scheduled for Wednesday, and Intelsat will be launching on Thursday. Important to note that different teams are working each of these launches, and we are ensuring that our teams will all be well rested. Also, I want to point out that if Crew-5 stays on track for Wednesday for the 5th, we will stand down from tomorrow's launch attempt of Starlink mission so that teams can focus completely on Crew-5 and be able to review any data needed. As always, flying the crew is our top priority, and crew safety is our top priority. Now, specifically to Crew-5, at noon Wednesday Eastern Time, we get to launch Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna to space. At the same time, we're preparing for about a week from now when we'll be returning our Crew-4 astronauts, Chell, Bob, Jessica, and Samantha, of course, to bring them back home safely to their families. Crew-5 is SpaceX's 8th human spaceflight mission since May 2020. That kind of always blows my mind when I get to say those kinds of statistics. It's pretty incredible where we've come and really, relatively speaking, how quickly we've done this as a joint team with NASA and everybody working at SpaceX. This is actually also our 4th human spaceflight to the ISS this year. And this is really cool because fundamentally human spaceflight is core to our mission to make life multiplanetary. I'm really proud of the team and very grateful. We're all very grateful to the teams on both sides, NASA and SpaceX, and to their families for the time and sacrifices they make to make this happen. Our vehicles, Dragon and Falcon, are both healthy. They remained safe during Hurricane Ian, and they rolled out to pad this past weekend. Yesterday, the crew and our joint SpaceX and NASA teams completed a full rehearsal of launch day activities. Everyone is ready for launch. This is the second flight of this particular Dragon spacecraft. It previously flew on Crew-3, carrying astronauts to and from the space station. Since then, several improvements have been made based on lessons learned from our previous flights and our desire to continuously improve our vehicles and services. Included on this is a new piece of hardware, is an upgrade to our waste system. And the crew will actually demo this system in flight to validate the design in a zero-gravity environment. We will continue to monitor the weather to ensure a safe launch to the space station, and continue to work through any findings. And as always, we need to listen to the data and make sure that we are ready to launch. We'll work closely with NASA as we do that, and we'll just make sure that everybody's ready to fly. And as we often say, we will not fly until we're ready. One of the reasons that we're able to do this is because we go through so many reviews and so many tests. Of course, we just completed the launch readiness review, as Steve mentioned, and we'll continue to look and listen hard. As always, we're grateful for the opportunity for NASA and ESA and our partners Russia to fly astronauts to the International Space Station. We thank you to the 45th Space Wing for their support in both of these launch and recovery operations, and are looking forward to a great mission. Thank you.
And we'll now go to Junichi Sakai.
Thank you for the introduction, and good evening, everyone. My name is Sakai Junichi, as the ISS Program Manager of JAXA. First of all, on behalf of JAXA, I would like to sincerely thank the NASA leadership, Space Exploration Technologies Corporation, and all the members who work so hard for the Crew-5 launch preparation and continuing ISS operation under the Hurricane Ian attack and tough COVID-19 situation. Countdown for the Crew-5 is about to begin. It is a great pleasure for me to be here with you. I spoke with JAXA astronaut Wakata Koichi the day before yesterday, and he is ready for the launch. The Japanese experimental module Kibo of the ISS is also ready and waiting for the new crew's arrival. I expect that making the most of his experience in space for 4 times in the past, astronaut Wakata Koichi will lead and succeed in a variety of missions with his American and Russian colleague astronauts and cosmonauts, and hope that he will enjoy his 5th stay in space. I'm looking forward to the launch and wishing a great success. Thank you very much. Arigato. So, hand over to the Sergey.
Good evening. Just less than 2 weeks ago, we had launch from Baikonur, launch of Soyuz that brought new crew to the station, and we just complete rotation on Russian segment. The previous crew, returned back on 29th, safely on Earth. But with these 2 flights, with flight of Soyuz and flight of Crew-5, we will start what we call integrated crew or exchange flight, when one of crew member from Russian segment will fly on American vehicle and one of American will fly on Russian vehicle. And this type of exchange will increase robustness of our program, and we will continue this practice to make our program more reliable.
And next we'll go to Brian Chiswick.
Okay, so from a weather perspective, we're certainly having a much different conversation this week than we were last week around this time, and that's because the weather at the launch site is looking very favorable, looking really good for the launch opportunities. We've had some really dry air and some nice weather actually in the wake of Hurricane Ian as that pushed to the north. Saw some dry air filter in behind that. Tomorrow we're going to have a weak front kind of push through the area, might spark a few afternoon showers, but behind that front, high pressure moves in, some even drier air pushes in as well. So we're looking at some really nice weather Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of this week. I should add that there is a watch item for the weather in the ascent corridor, specifically on Wednesday. The remnants of Hurricane Ian are actually spinning off the Delmarva coast and expected to stay there through Wednesday. So that's kind of spinning up winds and waves along the ascent corridor. So teams will be watching that closely, but I will say that conditions do improve as we head into Thursday and Friday in the ascent corridor. But for the launch weather, POV is just 10%, so 90% go for the cumulus cloud rule and flight through precipitation constraint in the very small chance that we get a shower. But overall, as I said, weather's looking really good at the launch site Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and just watching the ascent corridor on Wednesday. So that's all I have. Josh, back to you.
Thank you, Brian. And next we'll turn to our questions. If you'd like to ask a question, as a reminder, please press *1 on your phone to enter the queue. And our first question tonight will go to Bill Harwood at CBS News.
Hey, thank you very much. A quick question for Benji. Could you maybe go over the 3 items that Steve mentioned and give us a sense of, are these simple fixes? Are there any showstoppers in there? Just give us a few more details on those. Thanks a lot.
Hey, Bill, sure, I'd be happy to. And kind of to answer your last question first, I don't see any showstoppers here, and I certainly don't see anything that's adding elevated risk to the mission, that we would anything that we would accept elevated risk. As mentioned, we will only fly when we're ready. And part of getting ready will be resolve these. I'll kind of walk through them one by one just to help out. So the first one is our TVC thrust vector control actuator on the Falcon 9 launch vehicle. During status fire, we'd noticed there'd been out of family performance on that particular actuator, and it'll be replaced with a new unit. That is it's not uncommon to sometimes see out of family behavior on one of those actuators, and we actually have quite a bit of experience with replacing those with a new unit to make sure that everything is clean. And just to help a little bit more color on that, the importance of those actuators is that they're moving the engine and pointing it in the right vector, the right direction, so that all 9 engines work together to get the rocket to the right place. And so obviously we want those to work exactly the way they're supposed to. So when we see anything that looks a little bit off, we want to replace it with a new unit, and that's a standard process. Just read the instructions. Our drone chip for returning the launch vehicle. It has a communication issue that's basically a network comm type issue that's causing a difficulty operating the high power system, which ultimately is needed to drive the drone chip to the right place. And so we're trying to resolve that remotely. Right now, we don't want to send anybody over to the drone ship just due to weather and sea states where it is right now. But we also expect there's probably a time when we'll be able to send folks over to get in there and fix that well. But of course, we want personnel safety is top priority. So we'll make sure that's the case first, and then if we get people over there, or maybe we'll have already resolved it remotely. But the goal would be to be able to get people aboard the vehicle itself as early as tomorrow, and that gives us plenty of runway before Crew-5. Finally, we talked a little bit about the fire system, basically the fire suppression system on Dragon. And again, what happens is that there's a connection, as Steve mentioned, that we detected as leaking, and we're basically going to go through a replacement operation. We're going to replace the fitting and O-ring, refill the bottle, perform a pressure decay test, and then get back to our normal configuration. We actually expect to be able to have all of that done by tomorrow morning, again, well in advance of Crew-5, something that our teams know how to do. One of the things that we do at SpaceX on all of these kinds of issues is anything that isn't, a very standard operation, that the teams do, regularly at any of the sites. We also have the engineers, the responsible engineers themselves, who know those systems inside and out, will often travel in person to be present for those kinds of fixes. And it's just another layer of ensuring that everybody who has knowledge around that system are there and present to make sure that everything goes smoothly and catch anything else if we need to, if we can find anything. Again, nothing here that I see as a showstopper, and also certainly nothing that I think we would need to take any additional risk on with.
Thanks.
And our next question is from Stephen Clark at Spaceflight Now.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. Stephen Clark, Spaceflight Now. For Benji, I think I know you have different teams working these 3 different launches this week from 3 different pads in less than 3 days. Just curious, from a SpaceX perspective, how much space, how much time do you need in between Falcon 9 launches from different pads? I mean, could you do 2 in a couple of hours if you needed to? And what is, maybe for Steve Stitch, what is NASA's requirement for data review after a Falcon 9 launch before proceeding into a crew launch? Thanks.
That's a great question. And I think that probably the right way to frame that question, though, is really not about time per se. It's easy to try to always boil things down to how much time, but it's really about what data do you need to review? How do you know that you've learned what you needed to learn from the last operation, and that you've learned that in order to be ready for the next operation? That's a critical thing. So we've done a lot, at SpaceX to automate a lot of the data recovery, data analysis, and report generation. And at the same time, we've got just an army of awesome engineers who are ready. They're reviewing data as it's happening in real time during whatever operations, whether it's a static fire, or a launch, or a landing, or anything. They're seeing it happen in real time. They also have all of their automated systems that are doing a huge amount of analysis and producing a huge amount of reporting. And then they're also assessing those reports and the outcomes of those analyses. And that all happens very quickly. And then the way that we're organized, we have our chief engineers whose job it is to fundamentally decide from a technical perspective, are we ready to launch the mission that they are assigned to? So chief engineer, each mission has its own chief engineer, just like they have their own teams working things. That chief engineer gets to decide, hey, are we ready to really launch? And they also need to know what's happened in the last operation, so they get a handoff essentially from the last chief engineer. This is a process that we've been working on, over all these years and refining and able to move more and more rapidly, while in fact actually being able to assess more and more data. Long term, if we want to make life multiplanetary, we want to put thousands or millions of people on other planets and across the solar system and beyond. That really means that we have to be able to move into airline or aircraft-like operations. I think there's an airplane taking off every second or every half a second in this country or across the world right now, and one day that would be the ultimate goal for space flight. But it takes time to get there, right? We want to make sure do we have the robust systems and are able to assess that data. When it comes to crew launches, it's important that part of our process includes our partnership with NASA. And so we, as much as we think we can move, pretty quickly as we assess each mission and we go from one mission to the next, we also need to make sure that our partners are tight with us, and particularly on these crew missions, our NASA partners, and of course the astronauts who are flying are following along tightly and are able to do their work. NASA also has an army of great engineers who are ready to look at data and assess and make sure that, again, they have learned everything they needed to learn from the last operation and be ready for the next. And so, again, I try not to frame it too much as exactly like what is there a hard sort of just a rule about time, or is it about do we all really understand what it is that we need to assess and analyze and discuss to make sure that we're ready to go? And that's a lot of the good kinds of conversations that we have with NASA and internally all the time.
And I'll add, Steve Stitch, we worked hand in hand with SpaceX like we always do. We like to have about 2 days of standoff from, in this case, what was going to be the Starlink launch out of Vandenberg, and then our launch here at the Cape. And what we did is we worked with Benji and his team to establish the right handoffs for all the data reviews that we would do to make sure that we were ready to go fly. Our first priority really was today reviewing the data from the static fire, right? What the difference in these two flights is for crew, we always have SpaceX do a static fire just to make sure that the engines and the stage is working properly. We load propellant in both stages and make sure that's all working fine before we go put the crew in the vehicle. And so today we focused on reviewing the static fire data. We did a great job of turning that around from the 4 p.m. static fire yesterday on Sunday to today, and had a real thorough review before the launch readiness review. And then we had a great process laid out with SpaceX from Starlink to get us the data that we needed overnight, should the launch have occurred tonight, so that we could have reviewed the Starlink data tomorrow. So as Benji said, we've got this sort of cutout set up, and if we go set up for a launch on the 5th, then we would not we work with SpaceX and they would stand down, as he said, and not launch Starlink. And if we need to move for whatever reason, then we would maintain this about 2 days. And this launch is particularly favorable for this relative to sleep shifts, because the crew launch is really a nice launch time around noon. So.
And our next question is from Marcia Dunn at the Associated Press.
Yes, I think this question is for Joel. I'm wondering how many NASA employees and contractors, American contractors, are in Russia right now supporting the space station? And is that fewer than normal given the State Department's recent warning for Americans to leave Russia? And might this ongoing situation over there affect plans for the next crew rotation flight on the Soyuz? Thanks.
Good question, Marcia. So right now we're fully staffed over in the Moscow area. We have staff at the Star City facility. We have staff at Mission Control Center Moscow, and then we have a satellite office in the Moscow city. As far as numbers and stuff, we don't publicly put that out, but we are fully staffed over there. We do work closely with the embassy, and we are in, I'll say, if not daily, every other day contact with the embassy and keeping status of what's going on. The embassy is fully aware of our operations, and we work with them. When we were over in Moscow just a couple of weeks ago, we did talk with the acting ambassador there and made sure we're all in sync with what the operations are. So at this time, I'm not expecting any impacts to the upcoming, to the next Soyuz launch in the spring of next year. We have the staff that we need, and we continue to operate and work under the embassy guidance there.
Thanks.
And our next question is from Micah Maidenberg at the Wall Street Journal.
Hi there. Benji, NASA this year has awarded SpaceX 8 additional crewed flights to the space station, set for the next few years. Could you talk a little bit about these missions from a commercial perspective? What do they mean for SpaceX's launch business? Thanks so much.
Sure, thank you. And first of all, thank you to NASA and to the American people for their trust in us to continue this partnership and to continue being able to transport NASA astronauts and our international partner astronauts to the space station. It's a real honor, and it's again very grateful for them awarding these additional contracts. Obviously, from a commercial perspective, it's awesome. Right, we are a company, and we look forward to being able to serve as many customers as we can, and winning the trust of as many customers as we can. So it's great to have that to look forward to. I think there's a few things here. One is our Dragon program has really developed and is in full gear. I've probably mentioned in these briefings before that I think we should be able to launch at least every couple of months. A Dragon, if not more often, and be able to do multiple human space flights per year, as well as multiple cargo flights. And I think our systems and our teams are in place and already ready to do that. And so having these missions, already planned for and on dock are fantastic. The other thing that's important, both as a company and commercial perspective, so one thing from a commercial perspective, you always want to be able to provide quality, consistent services to your customer. And at the same time, what that means is also providing safe and reliable space transportation for our customers, in particular when we're flying crew members or critical cargo. And the ability to plan and know that we have an ongoing fleet or an ongoing manifest of missions is great, because our folks get to be able to plan and repeat and practice that effort. And every time we fly, we learn. Right? Every time we fly, we learn. Launch rate is not only critical for ultimately making life multiplanetary and creating a spacefaring civilization, but launch rate is also critical to learning and rapidly improving our ability to fly in space. So this kind of this kind of trust from the American public and from NASA goes a long way towards our mission.
As a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, please press star 1 on your phone to enter the queue. And our next question will be from Chris Davenport at the Washington Post.
Thanks for doing this. My question is for Mr. Krikalev. Earlier in the Ukraine conflict, there have been some very bellicose statements coming from the former head of Roscosmos, Dmitry Rogozin, about the future of the partnership on ISS. He even intimated that Russia would leave, could possibly crash the station into the ground, for example. I just wonder if you could give us a sense from Russia's perspective of where the partnership stands now, if it's on solid footing, and how long it would last. Thanks.
We work with our colleagues very closely, and we, on both sides, have very good experience of continuous human presence in space on Mir station, on ISS for many years. And we know that if we stop flying to space, that it would be big and negative impact for the program. So we, on the Russian side, we understand that we extend our participation in the station with our government until 2024. And we start to think about designing and building new station. But we know that it's not going to happen very quick, so probably we will keep flying until we will have any new infrastructure that allow us to do continuous human presence on low Earth orbit at least. So up to now we keep flying together. We are going to fly until 2024, and I know that NASA already made this decision. Other international partners are discussing and ready to make this decision, and we start to discuss extending our participation in ISS program with our government and hope to have permission to continue next year.
And our next question is from Jim Siegel at nasatech.net.
Thank you for taking my question today. It's a question for Kurt. I'm very interested in 3D printing of human tissue, and you mentioned that a new print head was going up with Crew-5. I was curious if you know about how thick are the individual layers of tissue that are used in 3D printing, either in the new print head or the current one, and what kind of material is actually being used? Is it human tissue or some other sort of derived tissue? Could you talk a little bit about that, please? Thank you.
Sure. As described, the biofabrication facility on orbit is really an optimum use of microgravity. Because you don't have the sedimentation that occurs on the ground, we can fly inks that are less viscous and more fluid, which allows better printing properties, thinner layers going down. The actual size of those layers I would have to give for you. But as we lay them down, of course, the inks in a 1G environment would tend to sediment out. And we're printing with cell lines. So whether that's cardiac cells or other types of cells, cartilage cells in the case of the knee meniscus experiments going on, these bioinks, after they're printed, form the 3D structure of the tissue that we're looking to grow on orbit. The more time they have suspended in that 3D configuration, the more they're allowed to develop and differentiate into the types of tissues that we're looking for. It's also easier to consider things like vascularization of tissue on orbit when you don't have sedimentation, and you can print vascular tissue as well as organ-type tissue. So again, we're looking at two primary uses for this print head, primarily with cardiac cells and then with knee implant cells that we'd be looking at in terms of osteoarthritis, a disease that impacts the knee strength after an injury. So we're very excited about this. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
And our final question for this evening is from Paul Shuttleworth at Sky News London.
Hi there, and hello from London. We're a children's TV show. Because it's very late here, our 14-year-old presenter Scarlett's actually gone to bed. But earlier on, she recorded this question for the panel, so I'll play that to you now. Thank you.
Hello, this is Scarlett from FYI on Sky News. I'm actually in my pajamas because it's very late here in England, and I've got school tomorrow. But I just wanted to say good luck with the mission. And my question is, how will Mission Commander Nicole Mann's time in space help NASA return to the moon?
Well, let's see.
I can.
Go ahead, Steve, and then I'll jump in.
Yeah, I can take a cut at that. It's pretty exciting to see Nicole and Josh and Koichi and Anna all fly this mission. I think every time a crew flies into space, they're able to learn a little bit more about the mission. And so, looking forward to our return to the moon on a future flight. Certainly, that experience in space, how to command the vehicle, how to operate in space, how to live on space on the space station. All those things really do feed forward to exploration. Our missions, I think the criticality of how we have to execute these complex handovers with space station and working with Joel and his team, really put us forward toward the lunar missions, which some of those missions are going to require multiple launches for multiple vehicles to assemble and aggregate enough propellant in space to go then execute the lunar landing. And so not only is Nicole learning and her crew learning about how to go fly in space and then prepare ourselves to return to the moon, but also we're learning as well on the ground. And I'll see what Joel has to add.
Thanks, Steve, and good question, Scarlett. The other thing I'll add is the crew members, Nicole specifically, will be doing experiments on some of the life support systems that we need to improve on, that we're going to need to go back to the moon and then eventually to Mars. And so her and their crewmates will be working on that, and these will help us go further and further on exploration. And then I'll finish and say, do your homework every day, and maybe we'll be talking to you one day from space.
Thank you, Joel. And that's going to wrap things up for us here. NASA's SpaceX Crew-5 mission is targeting launch at noon Eastern, Wednesday, October 5, from Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy. We'll start our live coverage at 8:30 a.m. on launch day and continue coverage through docking the following day. You can watch our coverage live on NASA television, the NASA app, and the agency's website. And you can follow us on the website, on social media, and by following nasa.gov/commercial crew. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you for your participation. Participants, you may disconnect at this time.